Hey everybody, just give me 1 second. Hoping there's nothing weird on my desktop. Okay. Hi, my name is Hilary, and I have talked exactly once about information security before, and there were 4 people in the room, so this is crazy. I'm really flattered that you guys came to this. So this talk is a reporter's look at open source intelligence. We'll start with what open source intelligence is, and the definition is vaguely publicly available, open, or accessible sources, right? And so there's a little bit of contention about if something is open or accessible, but it wasn't on purpose, if that follows in OSINT, and I don't have a good answer for that. But it does not specifically mean open source software, which I learned the hard way, although open source software is used in OSINT. So the challenge is, at least from my perspective, when I worked as a journalist, which will come up in the next slide, what is relevant? Where can you find it? This talk is broadly a number of search sources. Is this working okay? Yeah? Okay. Search sources and tips from what I used to do as an investigative reporter. So we'll have a lot of government databases, private databases, public databases, places to find information, and some ideas on how to shield yourself and your users. So why is this person talking? That's a great question. So I worked as an investigative reporter for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I was a financial and business reporter. So primarily doing report-ups and write-ups of analyst trading, stock market stuff, news segments, things like that. Focused a lot on regulatory filings and things of that nature, so super light reading. And then after that, I worked for 4 years as an investigative and documentary reporter. I'm a 6-time award winner for enterprise and investigative work. Feels really weird to be talking about myself. As a reporter, I was used to being on the other side of the microphone, and I worked in radio, so I'm not used to being visible in said times. So anyway, so that's what I did for the last 6 years. Starting last October, I took the plunge. I'd been going to school part-time for information security and took the plunge and started that full-time. So I currently work mostly full-time in information security at a utility company, and I have 6 classes at the same time. And it's very different than what my life was a year ago, but so far it's been very rewarding. And I have had the luck to get involved in MISEC, which is a Michigan meetup group. They have Lansing and Jackson and Southfield, and I'm seeing some familiar faces, so most of you seem to know about that already. But if you don't, here's a plug. They have a booth over on the other side, and they're a bunch of really great people. They have helped me get involved in this community and learn a lot of things as well. So that's why this person is talking, and this person is me. This slide has a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, but I promise the rest of the slides are not this dense. So first and foremost, I wanted to talk about a couple of primary resources. I found this book shortly after I went back to school full-time, and it was pointed out to me. I said, I don't really know much of anything technical. I don't know how to hack into a network. I don't know how to do this and that and the other thing. And a friend of mine had pointed out, well, actually, there's this field of information called open source intelligence, and that's what you used to do, but that's what we call it. So I've kind of learned a little bit more about that and how to maybe discuss some of the things that I know and translate that into things that would be interesting to you guys. This is an amazing, incredible book. It's by a guy named Michael Basil. He also is Hiding from the Internet. He's done some podcasts with socialengineer.org, who are the guys who run the SCCTF and some other things. Really good podcast. He is a wealth of information. He's spent a number of years working in forensics and investigations and things of that nature. I just remember I wrote up a couple of note cards that might help me. So I'm going to go ahead and take those out. His website is inteltechniques.com. He also has an OSINT framework, and he has a virtual machine that I think he calls, see if I made a note on that. Well, Buscador. Yes, Buscador. So that's kind of the same idea as with Kali. It's a Linux distribution. It comes prepackaged with a bunch of different OSINT tools. He has tons of resources on his website. Like I said, I found this book to be incredibly helpful, and I do reference some of his work throughout the talk. So one-stop shop, Michael Basil, inteltechniques.com. You can find everything there. So start with a couple of browser extensions. There's extensions for pretty much everything, right? His book has, oh boy, I think like close to 100. These are ones that I've either used or have looked at using. Exit Viewer will provide you information from photographs, metadata, things like that. Down them all makes downloading a ton of files easier than if you're just doing it one-off. It's kind of like a batch process. Copy all links will copy all links on a certain page. It's kind of, the name helps out. The name is what it does. There are also add-ons for browser protection and masking and OSINT documentation. List.it, it's an older one, but it's one that he uses. I had a different documenting process when I was a reporter. Had I known about this tool when I was reporting, I probably would have tried it out, but I haven't tried it out personally, but it does come highly recommended. You can also do like search image everywhere in Firefox and Vibe. Vibe is a sort of app. It's an add-on that allows you to search someone's email address across a bunch of different social networks. What I was trying to do with this talk was avoid some of the more technical things and some of the demos, like things like Shodan, which other people are going to do way better than me, and you can find on YouTube. And I was mostly avoiding social media as well, because again, other people can do that way better than me, and you can find them on YouTube. But I can answer some questions about that stuff if you guys have questions later, or you can hit me up on Twitter. You can talk to me afterwards. I'm pretty approachable. I made a note on VPNs, say virtual private network. You guys probably, does everybody know what a VPN is? Yeah, okay, cool. The idea there is kind of if the person or the information or the thing that you're seeking, if you don't want their Google Analytics to tell them that you were looking for it, or you don't want to be from a certain location, or you want to look like you're outside of the country, or things like that. I have not used the service Private Internet Access, but it was something that Michael Basil had recommended, so you could try to look into that. I have used Tails before, which is it's a disposable operating system. I don't really know how useful it's going to be if you need to be maintaining that information and continuing to look at it again, but if you need some sort of masking your tracks for any sort of legitimate reason or illegitimate reason, Tails is pretty cool and it's relatively easy to work with. So those are Firefox. There are also some for Chrome. One thing I have done is Chrome Sniffer. It will show different technologies and frameworks for any particular website. So it will tell you if it's on WordPress. It will tell you if it uses Flash. It will tell you if it has other framework things. Sometimes it can tell you what the programming language might be, which can be helpful for a number of reasons. So I have used that one and I do like it. Profit and Hunchly are two that I haven't used but have come recommended. Hunchly is not free, so that's kind of the one thing there. But most of the other things, almost everything that I reference is free, publicly accessible, and totally available at any point. So just a couple recommendations there. All right, so we come on to search terms, which I learned is also called Google dorking, which sounded really cool. I am going to publish my slides after this talk, and so that's why I'll have links in it throughout. You can learn more about Google hacking at either of those places. I think the second link is a tool, and then the first one is the GHDB Google Hacking Database. The basic idea of it is it uses search operators, right? So you can put quotes in to only receive information with those words in the quotes that you've entered. You can use file types. So this was site.michigan.gov, file type PDF, bubble bath, but not pizza. So that will return me things that have bubble bath somewhere in the title, but not pizza. I do not think you will be surprised to find out taking off pizza makes no difference in that search. There were not and bubble bath and pizza, but I was surprised that bubble bath returned anything. I actually tried a number of really silly words, and I got a result for everything, so we went with bubble bath. I also, all of the examples that I give are going to be Michigan.gov or a Michigan thing, or they're going to be something to do with Mid-Michigan or Grand Rapids. The last place I worked was the local NPR PBS station here in Grand Rapids. I was an investigative reporter and did general assignments, so I did a lot of city documentation. So there's no reason in particular. I don't mean to be calling out any of these organizations. Michigan.gov, as you might imagine, has a ton of information, and these are the sites that I'm familiar with. Anything that I reference in terms of like, a little bit later we're going to talk about business information. Almost every single state has something similar. It may not be called exactly the same thing, but every single state is going to have a state website, right? Every single state is going to have some sort of business depository or, not quite the word I was looking for, but I think you guys get it. Every state will have something. So if it's not exactly what it is that I'm showing, Nevada has something very similar. Other basic web resources and searches include the Wayback Machine, which is archive.org, which also has so many awesome things that have actually nothing to do with previous versions of websites. Like they have things that have expired from copyright are available, old-time radio shows are available, and I had no idea. It's really cool, so if you're into either of those things, that's also a good resource for that. Not the purpose of this talk, but cool anyway. If you're not familiar with the Wayback Machine, it will show you different versions of a website that you're visiting. So what the website looked like today may not be what the website looked like 2 years ago, and I would use that on occasion to see maybe it was a company and I was trying to figure out how long their website had existed, or what company came before that, or what did it look like 2 years ago, what were they telling people 2 years ago, is it the same thing that they're telling people today? So that can be really useful. The only caveat with that is it needs to be a site that gets trafficked enough to have been cached and captured. If your website, my website, the only visitor that I am aware of is my mom. Hi, Mom. And so I am not going to show up there, right? Because she's clicking more than she needs to, but not enough to show up there. So if you're not seeing results from that, that's why. You can also check the Google Cache results. I was hoping I had a... Okay. So right there, underneath the blue link, there's a green link. If you click that arrow, you can do different stuff with it. I believe that's where the cache lives. So you can see former versions of the site. Kind of like archive, just in a different place. I think I left the FTP search in there because that's just another example of the Google dorking with the operators, right? So in URL, somewhere in the URL fields, it would have FTP, right? You could do in URL WP or /WP/ to try to find something, see if it's a WordPress repository or if there's a site there that is living in WordPress. What did I search here? So I was looking for confidential, and the URL had to have FTP in it, and those were my examples. This is almost from a year ago, because I was showing this to someone else. And if you search that today, it's actually going to show up with a bunch of different stuff, mostly that go to doing OSINT. So I don't know how that's changed over time, or if this has become a very popular search term, but that's what you get today. This is my only slide on social media that I am aware of. Again, other people do this way better than I do. I am also, again, referencing Michael Basil's website. It's a custom email search tools where you can search for an email address across all of those different things. They also, as you can see on the, would that be on the right column? Left column if you're looking at the computer. He has customized search engines for Facebook, for Twitter, for Instagram, for usernames, for real names. It's really, 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 really cool. The Facebook one is particularly useful. It doesn't do anything really in particular that searching for it in Facebook wouldn't do, but you're able to do a lot more things at one time. So I could search for, let's search for an email, and that will give me the number or the account itself that's located with it, right? So Hilary.Farrell or user 1476, whatever. So I can take that string and I can search for any photos that that person is tagged with. I can search for locations where that person may have been. I can search for other associated accounts, things like that. What was I trying to say in this one? Privacy, privacy, privacy. You want to be careful who your profile associates with. I did a mini demo. This was in class. Our assignment was to do OSINT on a student. That student that I was assigned has a mom who posts everything on Facebook, just like my mom. I love you, Mom. Love you, Mom. Because she's gonna watch this too, I think. She's a really good mom. But if your mom is not paying attention to your privacy settings, as this person's mom was not, I was able to gain a lot of information from that person's mom. I also found a photo that was tagged, that person's mom posted, that person wasn't tagged in, but we had to find the name of the pets, and someone referenced the name of the pet in the post, right? So when you're thinking about your operational security, also think of the operational security of those around you. LinkedIn is not always your friend. I'm trying to think of how to say this because I know this is being taped. Hypothetically, if you were to be in an environment with a lot of important people who would have a lot of things on their LinkedIn and are then surprised that they are getting a lot of emails that they did not sign up for, there are people who are scraping that, right? Like, I would scrape that when I was doing investigative reporting because I need to figure out who my contact is, where they are, what they're doing, what is their name, what is their email address, how can I figure out the email convention so I can try to figure out how to email that person. So someone made the comment outside that reporting security researchers and stalkers have a lot in common. They're not wrong. Our ends are hopefully not the same, but the means are similar. So LinkedIn is not always your friend. Maybe think about how specific you want to be about the job that you're doing. I would recommend you turn off geotagging. It's a location setting for your phone, for your browsers. Most of you are probably aware of that. It gets referenced again in a couple of slides. And I think that's it for that one. Okay. There's a couple of random slides in here that I just could not figure out how to better sort. So this is more along the idea of user awareness. I love recycling. I used to live in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids recycling is amazing. It is free. It is single stream. The city loses money on that. And still provides it because it's a public service, and that makes me so happy. But because of my passion for recycling, I currently do not live in a place where recycling is collected, and so I collect it, and I sort it, and I drive it to the recycling facility. My neighbors are aware of this, my friends are aware of this, so they give me their recycling. Someone gave me this. Your credit card is here. Here's the account number for your credit card. This is your access line, your card access line. There's your PIN. That's your address. Probably don't recycle that. Probably shred that. And I know it's probably kind of funny. It was funny to me, and I talked to this person after, and I said, hey, you got it with this. Actually, they gave me something else. I said, hey, you got to stop doing this. I'm giving a talk on OSINT. If you keep giving me this stuff and you don't shred it, you are going in my presentation. So here we are. This is good information to shred, right? If you work for a company and you're working inside of information security, this is a great example. Not everyone is, you know, maybe everybody wants to recycle, but they're not thinking about how that information could be used. If you don't have a shredder, maybe suggest that user to be careful about what they're printing. Be careful about what you're printing, but also be careful about how you're disposing of that information. This was not the only one. What else did I get? I had it had an Xfinity bill. I had healthcare changes with the person's healthcare number. And it just, you know, I mean, I'm not super creative with this stuff, but there were a number of attacks that would be relatively easy to execute on that. So think about your trash and recycling. Where I recycle, it is an open area, and if I felt like it, I could go dumpster dive because no one's watching, there's no camera, no one's paying attention. Be careful what you do. Photos. This might be my only other random slide. I think everything else falls under more or less of a pattern. Metadata is super helpful. That's the exit viewer that I talked about earlier. Lots of stuff. Lots of stuff is stored in photos. Facebook does strip some of that information, but not all. This is a picture that I pulled from someone's Facebook profile. You can see probably they're on an iPhone. Time that it was taken, that impressed me. That's not always going to be accurate. I tried it with some other stuff. That one does have to be accurate. I asked them, and they were a little creeped out that I asked that question, which is fair. Totally fair. Sorry about that. But there's a lot of information that you can find even if there's not locational information. The only caveat that I would note there is to be careful. Not all tools are created equal. Also, probably doesn't need to be said, but be careful on what you upload to a random website to get that metadata information, unless you know the website. This was just something really cool. This goes off of location data. I don't know that much about this project. The guy's name is Felix Kraus. I put it there. If you were to go find that tweet or find his account, he's got GitHub. It's an application that will, if you allow it, right? So assuming you think Felix Krauss is a reasonable person to have an application on your phone that would do this, it can show you, based on all the photos that you've taken, here's the information that I have. This is the information that's visible to the applications that you use. And this is crazy. Like, this is crazy. That's so much information. If you find the right viewer, you can probably see a lot of that stuff too. His project seemed really cool. I don't have it on my phone, but I would recommend looking into it. So now we're going to get into the more reporter stuff. And I'm actually wondering, anybody have the time? Cool. Okay. I talk kind of fast, so if I'm talking way too fast, raise your hand. I'm a little nervous. I'm not as nervous as I thought I would be, but I also assumed there'd only be 10 people here. So, again, I really appreciate everyone's here. Brief intro to FOIA. Who's heard of FOIA? Who knows how to write a Freedom of Information Act request? Hey, that's not bad. Okay, Freedom of Information Act. The government says you have access to public information. So the way that you get it is you write a letter. The letter needs to be pretty specific. This is a sample for FOIA for Michigan. This link will give you a link to all of the states for a sample FOIA request. Understanding, of course, not all of us are from Michigan, and not all of us have questions and information that we'd like to receive from the state of Michigan specifically. But this is a general idea. And really, like, following this form, it's super, super easy. Fill in whatever. You can request, please let me know if this is going to cost more than $100 before you do it. You can also, you can identify yourself as a representative of the news media, etc. I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you are a representative of the news media. Mainly, it just may not work. And this is probably a good time to note, too, that my experience with requesting public information is going to be a little different than your experience for requesting public information, assuming you don't say that you're a news reporter. I have never had a real challenge with it. I have some horror stories of amounts that came back to me that were ridiculously high, but I have never not been able to get the information that I needed. I also found most of the time, because most of my work was state and local government, I didn't need to do this. I just had to call the right person. I had to say, hey, I'm looking for this information. I'm doing a story on X. Can you send it to me? Yes. I don't know how that would play out as, hey, I'm a member of the public. I want this information. Can you send it to me? But I think a phone call is going to go a long way. So almost any government agency has a FOIA person that's required in the law. They have a person that processes that stuff. It gets to be a pain in the butt if you can't figure out who that person is that's processing the stuff. That can be a phone call. Once they receive it, they have 5 business days to respond to you, and the response will either be there was nothing responsive to your request, or hey, we have this information. How would you like to proceed? They do charge for it, and it can be kind of controversial. I have a friend. What the law says is they can charge the lowest hourly rate of the employee who can do it, right? But in some cases, that employee is going to be an attorney. The lowest possible rate for the attorney to do it is not going to be cheap. They can also charge a percentage of incidentals, so that employee's healthcare, insurance that goes into it. That's why the number might be high. They can also charge reasonable administrative fees. The definition of reasonable administrative fees has kind of changed due to court challenges and things of that nature. I believe right now the bench part is 10 cents a page for printing, and there will be another couple of things in there too. I know MCL, Michigan Common Law Code, is not the easiest read, but there are a lot of resources out there that can talk about FOIA. And again, like I said, I have never had a big deal on any of this, and my experience is going to be a little different than yours. But if you ever have any questions about how to do this stuff, I am on Twitter. I'll have my Twitter name at the end because it's kind of weird to spell, but you can hit me up. You can OSINT my mom and find my Facebook and ask me there. Sorry, Mom. Only other note I wanted to do is the LORA, the Legislative Open Records Act. This is not law. This really came out of everything that happened in Flint. There was a large call for additional accountability, which I think is deserved, where right now the state of Michigan legislators and the governor's office are exempt from FOIA requests. There are a couple of other things too. FOIA can say, hey, this is a matter of security, I can't tell you. If it's a police record, they can say, hey, this is an open investigation, we can't give you this information. They are supposed to tell you that. But what Laura would have done is open up legislators and some of the governor's office to these requests. It did make it through the House. It is sitting in the Senate. Nothing has happened to it since March. We'll see how that goes. call your local congressperson, let them know that you're interested. I think it's really important, and a lot of states do have sunshine laws that do include your legislators and your governor, and I do think that that's important. I'm also biased as a reporter. I want that information, but I do think it's important. So I do not have a FOIA example in so many words, so we're going to use this instead. This was from the Secretary of State, but it's very similar. This is a vehicle history request. All you need for the vehicle history request, I did this on a VIN number, but I think you can do license plate and other information. It does not have to be you. It could be somebody else. Please don't do my mom. It's for, but it follows the same protocol, right? There's a person in that office that you have to contact and you ask for it. Because I was a news reporter, I got my request expedited, but I still did have to pay. If you go through the website, the Secretary of State makes it kind of challenging to find, and I think their timeline is 6 to 8 weeks. So if I were you doing this request, I would fill it out. I would find someone to call in the Secretary of State's office. I would say, I filled out this request. It's $8 a record. What this is referencing is an investigative piece that I ended up doing. This paperwork specifically is what proved, let me back up a second. This was on fraudulent car sales. There are a number of dealers in West Michigan, as well as across the nation, I am sure, that are, I would say, predatory on selling used cars. This one was not the one that you would think of where the insurance rates and the interest is like 25%. These guys charge you no percent, but they sold you really bad cars, and they were taking advantage of loopholes in salvage vehicle titling and the auction process once a car has been salvaged. And all of this, kind of a lot of really, really dry stuff that's not necessarily relevant. I did put a link to what that story turned into if you are so inclined to check it out. But what we're looking at here is my, what's the word? My flaming sword of justice, the document that I needed, right? Because you'll see here, the odometer had 204,000 miles, and now all of a sudden, 3 months later, it has 131,000 miles. That's not how odometers work. That's not how odometers should work. And that's how I got that information. That was very similar to a FOIA. I had to submit my information. I had to submit the reason why I wanted it. I had to submit the background information, and I had to pay for it. But I got the information, and you can too. City and county records can really go for a while, and I have more slides left than I thought. So, what are the important ones? Almost all of these can be found online or in person. It's going to depend on how big your area is. A village's website is going to be not of the same quality as the website for the city of Grand Rapids, which their website is a lot of things, but they have a great information portal. It's like a data fire hose. They have so much stuff. The city of Grand Rapids does really well with this stuff. You do need to have a little more technical knowledge than the average resident in order to really use that fire hose, but, and this, I'm biased, I was reporting on this stuff. I happen to find the way that they saw this sort of stuff, this access to data, to be very refreshing and unusual for a city of this size. So go Grand Rapids. But yeah, almost all of this stuff is either available through them, or in the case of like crime mapping, that's going to be, you're more likely to find that from some sort of third party, although the city of Grand Rapids does do crime mapping in their residential portal. Property records, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but foreclosures, delinquencies, purchase, titling, sales, things like that, that can all be great ways to find out more information about your person of interest. Any business conducted for the public is public, with a couple of caveats. One of those is what I mentioned earlier about the police reports with an active investigation. Almost everything that your city or your county or your state does is supposed to be conducted in front of the public, for the public, and available to the public. Sometimes that means you're going to go into a pretty dusty room and they're going to hand you a box, but it's available. It's there, it's available. I had a quick note on fiscal years. I think it's a couple slides later. Okay, other government and public information. These are actually a couple resources that are not specific to a county. Blackbookonline.info is another Michael Basil recommendation. I found it to be kind of useful. It depends on how big, how small your county is, how much information they're publishing. Clearly, if your county doesn't have any of this information, it's going to be really hard for them to find. But public records of that usually are available through those. Your mileage may vary. You also have Social Security Death Index and Social Security Number Validator. I don't know why you would need to validate a social security number, but if you do, that's the link. State and federal criminal databases. For Michigan, that's Otis. Otis is pretty powerful. If you have the person's, theoretically, if you just had a person's last name, you could probably find out, well, you could probably find a lot of people that last name, depending on what that last name is. But they do provide a lot of information. That's going to be really more for some other applications. Maybe you're trying to track someone down. Maybe you want to make sure your neighborhood is safe. Maybe, I don't know, you ran into this guy 5 years ago. You owe him $20. You got to find him. Little, if he's on a parole. Or she. I'm trying to think about, honestly, the practical application for Otis for me was just reporting on news stories to see where this person was lodged. Are they in jail? Are they out? What is their criminal background? So probably not the same reasons that any of you would need it, but it is very useful. Quick note on fiscal years! Yay! Fiscal years. They are weird. Companies generally follow fiscal year December 31, so that's the last day. So when we think of a year, right, you start January 1st, you end December 31st. Not everybody does that the same way, and that will impact your results depending on what you're looking for. So companies are generally this way, but not always. I think about 65% of the companies that are listed on the NYSE or NASDAQ, so publicly traded companies, that is their cycle. Other companies are, HP is an example of one that is not. Their fiscal year is October 31st, November 1st. So November 1st is the first day of the fiscal year, October 31st is the last day. So about 2/3 of the company follow this convention, another third, you're going to have to figure it out. It's pretty easy, it's a Google search. Cities in Michigan generally follow fiscal year June 30 to July 1, so your first day is July 1st. They're forward cycling. I meant to do the math on this earlier. What is this, October? We're in fiscal year 2018. It's going to end June 30th. Counties in Michigan generally follow September, October 1st. The state does as well. So October 1st is your first day of the fiscal year. September 30th is your last day of the fiscal year. And again, I mention that because if you're getting into county records and city records, or you're asking for things that are responsive, you want to watch that on the dates. These are, okay, this next slide, not this one, but the very next one is one of my favorite things in the universe. This is PACER. This is the Federal Public Access website for case locators for court cases and docket information. Going rate, 10 cents a page, $3 a document. It's kind of expensive. Speaking from personal use of an account that is actually not mine. Thank you, member of the audience whose account I use. If you spend less than a certain amount of money a quarter, they just don't charge you. Your mileage may vary. We did was like $14, $17. If it's less than that, they didn't charge. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this means that I'm going to get charged for PACER now, but they may not bother charging you if it's only a couple bucks. But it is very, very, there's lots of information. You got case, you got docket info for U.S. districts, you got court of appeals, you have bankruptcy courts, you have federal court opinions, pretty much anything that's federal government. Now, if you don't want to pay 10 cents a page or $3 a document, you can use Recap, which is PACER backwards, and it's free. So people who have pulled that responsive PACER request will then go and upload this here. So then you can see it here for free. And I love it. It's such a good idea. This is a project between the Free Law Project and department in Princeton, but it works very similar to PACER. You're going to find the same information. You're just not going to have to pay for it. Not every case is going to be in here clearly, but you might want to check this first. Property records. Who's familiar with how to look up a property record? Wow, nice. Okay, so I don't know how deep I want to get into it. You could get a property record, anyone who owns property, right? Or pays a utility bill in some cases. You get your name, the partner's name, the address of that person, clearly, their tax status, the number of properties, the property history of that property and their number of properties, sales history of those properties, even utility bills in some cases, and the history of that utility bill, so who paid it, if it's not the name of the person who's on the property. You can get other invoices associated with the property. The example that I thought of was local violations. I spent a lot of time in both the city of Saginaw and the city of Grand Rapids property record lookups. For Grand Rapids, mostly it was because if any of you are from Grand Rapids or even have been to more than one conference, you will see that a lot of things in Grand Rapids have changed. And there's a lot of development. There's a lot of interest in development. Developers do not usually use their real name on those documents. So we look at the property requests. This is one way to get it. This is a friend of mine. I left enough of that last name in there for those of you who also know this friend. But other than that, just an example. This is an example of what I was talking about from Jackson. So from here, we see the current bill. Current bill's been paid. Actually, I don't even know if that had a full data set in it, but you can find that there. Owner and taxpayer information. You have the address. You have the reference number. You also have the, in some of them, they'll have different parcel types, and so you can see that too. And as you might imagine, somewhere in the back end of that website, this is a CSV file, so you can always, work with it in prettier ways than the GUI that the web application presents you with. This was an example from Jackson. AccessMyGov.com municipal directory will give you a bunch of different municipalities. Not everyone's going to be there. There's also a website called BSNA. They do a lot of software for real estate sort of things, but they have those too, and they'll link you directly to the city or the county or the state's property records database. Some of those are not free. Most of them are free, or you can find a way to make it free, or you can contact the municipality directly and ask them to do a search. And again, that would definitely fall under FOIA, but I think that would be a really good example where you could just call somebody and ask about it. I was investigating a fraudulent death. Well, it wasn't a fraudulent. I mean, he died. There's no fraud in the death. But the death had occurred under questionable circumstances, and so I needed the coroner's report. And so I called the county clerk's office, and they sent me a CSV within the hour. Again, your mileage may vary. The reporter thing probably helped. I can't imagine they get a whole lot of calls from regular residents asking for every single person who's died in the last month and a half. I don't think they got a lot of calls from reporters either. It was an objectively weird request, but that is information that they have and they can provide. And it's public information. This is kind of more of a okay, so let's say you have a ton of property information, what can you do? This was an investigative story I did in the city of Saginaw. All of those dots are foreclosed properties, and that's not even mortgage foreclosure, that's just tax foreclosure. And so the story ended up being, I was a baby reporter, and I was a baby programmer, so I did not know that you could probably do this a lot easier in a CSV file, and so I manually entered all of these data points. I really like data. I have really liked learning about PowerShell and other things that you can do that aren't quite like that. But what we ended up finding out was close to somewhere around 20% of all parcels in the city of Saginaw were tax foreclosures. They were not paying taxes. In most cases, I mean, someone would just flee, because you have 3 years from when you start the tax foreclosure process to when you actually have to be out, and that's if you don't appeal. And if you pay at any point, and you get back on track, and you don't pay again, now you got another 3 years, right? So these were I don't know how familiar any of you guys are with Saginaw, but it was almost like a microcosm of Detroit. You have thousands of properties that have not been maintained, that people leave. They leave. It's the property is worth nothing. The house is falling apart. And so the city of Saginaw's challenge was, well, how do we deal with this? And I thought, well, where are they? And so that was the story. The dots mean different things, and if you're really interested in seeing what that map ended up being, I can give you a Google Maps link. I didn't bother with it here because I don't know that anyone's going to write down that string, go home and look it up. But if you're interested, you can ask me about it. This is one of my favorite websites. This is the Federal Election Commission. Federal Commission? Okay, they have so much information. Data.gov is this guy. There's been a movement in the government over the last years to really make this a lot more accessible. There's a group that does this in particular. They start with 10. Does anyone know this group? 10 something? No? Okay. It's really cool. This in particular, they even have they have a live page where you can see, it's basically like an analytics dashboard. You can see how many people are on any given site at a given time, right? What are the most popular sites? I like to go to it around tax time. It's just, woo! Everybody is filing their taxes. It's kind of cool. They had data sets based on topics, so even if there's nothing, this isn't exactly OSINT unless you're OSINTing the entire agricultural industry, but there's a lot of data set, which is amazing. FEC, what I had here, this didn't end up turning into a story, but I was interested in, well, how many people file for candidacy every year and had it changed. So in 2012, I think there were somewhere around 500. In 2016, there were 1,800 people who filed to become president, including MX Actual Literal Dragon from Ann Arbor under the Socialist Party. So the committee was the Committee to Elect Actual Dragon, #President 2016. So whoever you are, Actual Literal Dragon, you gave me quite a laugh. But all that information, this is just, that's a piece of paper. It's got a phone number on it. That's why we cropped it. It's got a phone number, it's got an address, it's got an email. All 1,800 people who applied to be president in 2016 have that information. Some of them cannot possibly be real people. I don't think Joe Biden was, well, that's not a good example. There were examples of, like, clearly, like, parody, so Donald Trump, but with 2 Ps, is probably not going to be Donald Trump's cell phone number, right? But there is a cell phone number on it, I guess you could call it. And then this was just kind of, this is the last point I wanted to make with visualization, just like so much information, because this is an FEC data set as well. This is Bill Schuette for Attorney General. This also didn't turn into a story. That's such a bummer. I mean, it didn't end up on the radio. This is a heat map. It will show all of the locations where people donated, cross-referenced by the amount of money that they donated. This was a really cool data set. I didn't pick Bill Schuette for any reason other than he had the meatiest data set. He had the most money in the state of Michigan. It's $500,000. This was about a year and a half ago. I was like, oh, $500,000? That's a lot of people to sort. I blocked out the people because that didn't seem fair. They didn't ask to be in my presentation, but I really want to show the power of Tableau. There is a free version of it. If you have the free version, you do need to allow your information to go up on their servers, your choice. But you get a lot of information from the FEC data set, and that was the example I wanted to give. In the slide, there's a link to go to the portal. They also, I'll toggle back real quick. If you go to the landing page for FEC, there's also all of these really great tutorials on how to use the data. So this stuff can be kind of intimidating for someone who's not steeped in it or super absolutely fascinated enough to like enter 3,000 individual data points into a map. So I find them to be really, really, really helpful. And there really has been, aside from, like I can't say for sure, I haven't talked to anyone in the government who does data. It appears that they are really trying to make this more open to the public, and that's a great thing. So, it's business time. Anyone? Yes! Okay. Someone else has to have seen Flight of the Conchords. Okay. It's business time. This is Laura. Unironically, this was my favorite link. This was my favorite website for a very long time, and I will tell you why. It is amazing. Laura is a licensing and regulatory agency, so they deal with a lot of things, like a lot of things, and they have a lot of other data sets. They've got data sets for who's registered to do business in every city and county based on what industry. I mean, they have so much. This page in particular is a database for any business that is incorporated in Michigan or does business in Michigan, and that's important because you have a lot of multinationals or like a lot of regional chains, right? So maybe your company does business in Indiana and Illinois and Michigan, and I can't speak to every single application of that in every single state's rules, but in Michigan, if you do business in Michigan, you need to be registered, you need to file paperwork annually, then you'll be in this database. That is the link. It might actually redirect to somewhere else now. I think it's changed. I memorized that at one point in my career because I am that person, and I was really super into the site. It is not easy to find. It is really not easy to find on the state of Michigan's website. I don't know if that's on purpose or on accident. I don't know that people even know that this exists. But it is not easy to find, so download my slides and get the link. And this was also, I had noted earlier, every single state has something similar. Every single state has something similar. There was a guy I was trying to track down who did business under a bunch of holding companies and across a lot of different states. And so I got his cell phone number, but I had to go to Michigan's Laura, I had to go to Delaware's database and Nevada's database and Florida's database. And I did finally find it, but it was like 20 different companies. Now, this site is not, all sites are not made equal. This site is running on a old version of Java. So do with that as you will. Please don't do it. Don't do anything with that as you will. Keep that in mind if you are using it. I can only get it to work on Firefox on an unsupported version of Java. Yay. But it's very meaty. Every single entity, and that's a person. And so when I pointed out earlier that some of this is also about how to shield your information and the information of your users, using a registered agent to register your business will keep your name off of this stuff. Otherwise, it's got to be your name, your signature, your state, your address, your cell phone, your email. And it's out there. I mean, it's really difficult to find, but it's out there. Give me a few more minutes and I will call on for questions, unless you were just stretching, in which case. Yeah! Shut up. Will you tell, like that, this is my favorite site for years. For years. Just because the amount of information that is there is incredible. And I'm so into it. I'm sorry for the Java thing. I can't run it in Chrome. I couldn't run it in, I don't have IE. Couldn't run it in Chrome. But every year you need to file this piece of paperwork right here. I think it's this guy right here. It's just your annual statement saying, yep, I'm still a business. My address is still this. See you next year. When you first start your business, you have to file a certain amount of information. It's not a lot of stuff. What I searched Bugaboo. I was like, does anybody have a business in Michigan named Bugaboo? They do. There are multiple businesses in the state of Michigan with Bugaboo in the name. The more you know. If you learn nothing else, there are creative names. And so when you start, you've got, and it's all redacted because again, like nobody asked me to go find Bugaboo, especially not this person who owns it, but you have their signature, you have the place where they're doing business, you have a phone number associated with it, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're going to move into publicly traded companies, business intelligence. How many people are familiar with publicly traded companies? Very nice. Okay. Every single publicly traded company will have some sort of easy-to-find investor relations section of their website because they want investors to be interested in investing money in their website. Well, maybe not their website directly. Some companies are just that, but they're gonna make that really easy to find. They're gonna make that super easy to find because they want you to buy shares of their company and work with your company. And so that's a Google search. This is ir.netflix.com. Netflix is going to be my example for a couple of other things. If you don't want to just do a bunch of Google searches, this is Edgar. This is the SEC. The SEC is what they file the regulatory paperwork with. All you gotta do is enter the company name. They're gonna drop down a ton of information. So, what I wanted to talk about was the filings that would be relevant to your interests. So, good forms for information are right here. Registration statements, 10K and 10Q, and the 8K, the 10, and this is, I don't know that, I got like 5 minutes left, so you can ask me about this if you have more information. There's a site called Investopedia that's super helpful and can break all this stuff down. But the DEF14A is the piece of paperwork you may be interested in because that's the piece of paperwork that has the executive officer's summary information. Sometimes that's contact information. Most of the time you're going to see salary, how that salary has changed, how the business has changed. If you're someone that's doing business intelligence, that one, and the, draw your attention, the 10K, the 10Q, and the 8K. Those are the big ones that you want to live in if you're doing business intelligence. That is going to be any sort of key thing that has changed, whether that's a big vendor contract. I mean, it has to be, like, if they buy a printer, it's not going to be in their filing. But if they buy 10,000 printers, it might be in their filing. It's anything that has any sort of key risk, business analysis, ownership changes, if someone has bought more than 5% of the company, things like that. So those are your big ones. There are a lot of those. Someone suggested I put a cat in here, so there's cat. And we are almost done. Software tools, I'm not going to go through any of them because, again, people do it way better than me. But Shodan is essentially, it's like a Google for internet-connected devices. It's crazy. There's a guy named Viss on Twitter, V-I-S-S, who does a lot of stuff. So if you are interested in Shodan, look him up. Maltego is fascinating, but it's for another time. The FOCA is my favorite, mostly because I'm just so fascinated by it. It's, I haven't been able to figure out who made it, and the version that I have is like last version, and it's several years old, so it's kind of buggy, but it does have a lot of really good information. It basically just scrapes the website for any sort of document that it finds, and you can choose the extensions over there. It will also give you some vulnerability indicators. So, like, I love this site. There is some, if your site that you're interested in has Cloudflare or some sort of protecting agent, it doesn't always work. Also, sometimes FOCA just doesn't work at all, and that's fine. I love it. Last slide is just on things to protect your data. We've talked about most of this. If you have a website, using Whois is very smart. I didn't even get into all that, but you can do Whois on a website, and you can find the contact information unless you have Whois blocked. My husband just got a website and didn't Whois block because he thought $2 was a waste of money, and now he's getting a bunch of calls for SEO tools. So, love you. Love you, love mom. Privacy settings are really important. Privacy setting for those around you is really important. And consider using a registered agent on transactions, especially if The S corp that also applies to LLCs and things like that. So registered agent, a couple bucks, but they file it for you, and then no one calls you. You don't have a reporter calling you to ask you why you've been buying all these properties in Grand Rapids, which you may or may not want. It's not bad to buy properties. Google Alerts was just important. I went back to the car story that I did. I set an alert for the VIN number, and about a month after I started looking into it, the car that was broken, that didn't run, was for sale in an A-line dealership in Ottawa County, which I was not expecting. But if you have things like Google Alerts, you can also do that with company information and assets and things like that, and keep people in your company, kind of see where they are before you find out another way. That's all I have. Does anyone have any quick questions? Cool. You've been a great audience. I have never talked to more than 4 people in public before, not on a microphone in the radio, so thank you so much for listening to me.